And so more and more, we're going to see that, and these specialized models trained for industry. And all of a sudden, it's not just, the bottleneck is not programmers, because language is used to instruct. So, okay, so there'll be an explosion around automating common, simple tasks. Okay. The last one, now.
Welcome, Collective Nation, to another installment of the GenAICollective podcast, Collective Intelligence. In the studio, we have Ofer from Tomato.ai. And so I would just love to start off the interview with tell us about your prior work experiences, what led you to those roles, and what specific insight you gained from that experience, and how that led to your current work.
Sounds good. Yeah, thanks for having me here. So I'm Ofer, and I've done a string of startups. I've been interested in startups from when I was a young kid and saw relatives do startups and was really inspired by that. The level of creativity and innovation is something I wanted to have as well. Over my career, was fortunate to sell 2 startups to Google and 1 to IAC, which owns Ask.com, and they've all been in different sectors, but the more recent string of startups has been in the contact center AI space. But I've done startups that are all B to B to C. So we build things, sell to businesses, which would be used by end customers. So B to B to C. It's a bit of a mouthful. Mm-hmm. So I never did consumer startups. That's not my thing. I like the art of the deal, and over the years, I've gone to do bigger and bigger deals, to the point where at this startup I did within Google's incubator called Area 120, I closed over $500 million in contact center AI deals and learned how to do. I did like 300 million plus multi-year deals, and now, lots of learnings. I'm sure we'll get to from that. The latest startup, I left Google 2 years ago to start Tomato.ai, Tomato. We, on calls, reduce the level of accent error. We call it accent softening. It's good for offshore call centers. That's the current focus, but I've done 2 other startups in the call center space. Happy to get into it as we talk about this.
I guess initially off the bat, why you mentioned that the sort of the B to B to C framework.
Yeah,
that's a very interesting sort of area to focus in on. What was attractive about that?
Yeah, so it's a way of like reaching millions of people. Each startup I've done, and I've done like 5 or 6, has reached millions of people. But I didn't have to think about the go-to-market for a consumer business, which I know nothing of. Well, I haven't had experience with. Instead, I like going after large partners that have the millions of customers and selling into them. And what's good is you sell into one customer that's large, all of a sudden you're servicing millions of people. And that's what I've grown to enjoy, that type of business. I like going after the big companies and selling into them.
Mm-hmm. And then, so with B2B to C, how much are you worried about your brand? Like how you present your brand?
Yeah. So, brand is still important, and we want to be known in the industry we're in and be thought of. So you're still doing brand building, but it's among the enterprises that might want to consider your solution. So it's not going to be a solution that someone on the street might know. But what you hope for is that people in your industry would definitely know you and see you as like the premier brand.
Got it. And you have a track record of sort of founding all these startups that integrate into customer experience and customer contact centers, and that as you mentioned has kind of percolated into selling to Google. Can you share some insights on how you identify those markets in the beginning of your journey, and then how do you approach the process of innovation? Like what the current competitive set is in the space?
Yeah. How
do you make sure that you're 10x better than them so that people even pay attention to you in the first place? Would be great to get your background.
So I like innovative businesses that are not crowded yet, and I think there's like 4 things that I look for in a startup that I'm doing or investing in. And so 1, you want like the right team for that business. Why is this like the world-class team to go after this idea? You need to have a good answer there. In this case, my co-founder and he also sold, by the way, contact center startup to Google in his own right. So between us, this is our 4th contact center AI startup. And no one's going to argue that it's not the right business for us. You know,
Right.
I'm the guy who can sell. He's the guy that can build. You need that combo. We're the right team. Okay, the next thing that you need is right market, and many of us have heard about this. But it needs to be a market where there's at least $1 billion spent by your target customers per year in the target market you're going after. So if it's like, let's say, U.S. consumers, they need to be spending at least $1 billion a year today or in 5 years. It's fine if it's a market that's going to form and you can justify to investors. Why is that important? Because if it's a $100 million kind of market and you capture most of it, that's still not interesting. An investor wants to see 100 million plus top line revenue, and if the whole market is that, then it's not interesting. So, right market means at least $1 billion, and hopefully a lot more than that. Dollars spent on your type of solution. A lot of people get this wrong.
So, how do you think about market size versus market growth? Because a good example is like maybe healthcare, where there's parts of the healthcare market that are huge but aren't growing as quickly. A lot of more traditional, maybe aerospace or some of these other industries where huge market not growing. And then what does that? If you kind of do the math, it means you have to be a market taker from other people, and so that can be really difficult when there's large incumbents.
Yeah.
Do you think how much is market growth?
Yeah, these markets you mentioned are massive and very competitive and very hard to break into. So every market has its dynamics, but you can't just think of it holistically as that market. You really have to narrow it down to the exact market. Oh, it's the dollars spent per year on helping research insurance for your cat. Okay, yeah, that's the market. What's that size? So it's important to well define it and not be misleading, or even to yourself, about the dollars you're going after. In terms of growth, investors like to see growing markets, but often the story can be there's going to be a new market form. That could be one story, or here's a new way of doing things, and then you're right, you're going to take market share away from others, and that's a fine story too. Lots of good businesses were built that way. Airbnb took money from hotels, and so on. Uber from taxis. Okay, the third key thing for a good business to start or invest in is one that is defensible. So let's say you found this amazing idea and you can build it in a day, and it takes off and does really well. 1 million people after a week using it. If you can't defend it, then you'll have all these people coming in, including incumbents, and you won't be able to compete. So defensible businesses are really important to think about. And I'll give you a few examples of how businesses can be defended. There was for example, so one is data. There was a guy I know who started capturing who-is records for domain names back in the late 90s. And as the new century rolled around, people started hiding who owns the domain. Right. But he had this information. So he sold for $80. He let people view who owned the domain so they can see if they can buy from them. Anyway, he built a large business with data that was proprietary. No one else had it. No one else could get it because a lot of it was already hidden as people started hiding the domains. So proprietary data is one way of protecting the business. Another is through contracts. There was a lady that started a business that shipped things from local malls to people's homes. Supply that wasn't used in the malls. Anyway, she signed up there's 4 families that own all the malls in the US, 80% of them. She signed them up to an exclusive deal because they realized, we can't have more than one service do this for us, otherwise it won't work economically. Anyway, she convinced them, and then she had a lock on the market. So that was a contractual, legal-based shutting out the competition. Another example is through unique IP. You've developed IP. That's, for example, with my startup. It took us almost 2 years now to get to a level of IP where this will start working, real-time speech generation, accent AI, which is an underdeveloped part of research. But now, anyone that wants to come in, they need to put in their 2 years to figure it out because there's no good research out there Another one is the team. We're talking about the team matters. If you have the world expert, oh, the 2 world experts are on my team. Good luck, figuring it out. So team is another way of shutting people out and defending a business. Does that make sense?
Definitely. That's super fascinating.
I could go on.
So a bit of a segue from IP. I mean, you have a special perspective in that you have been in the AI industry for a decade, right? You have worked on multiple companies in AI. I would love to hear you walk through your whole experience being in the AI world, and like stories you can provide, special insights you have. I'm sure you just got to have troves of this.
Okay, I will do that. But first, the fourth thing for starting a business, I'll just say I won't go into too much, is the right time. Why is this the right time? What changed right now in the market that now is the right time to do this kind of business? Why couldn't this have been done a year or 2 ago? You need a good answer to that for yourself and for investors, because otherwise it's not clear why no one's done it before. But if you're like, oh no, this just changed, this dynamic, and now this is much more doable, that's a believable story for like doing the startup now. Sometimes you do it too early, too late, and the startup fails. So timing matters a lot with startups. Okay, back to your question.
Yes, and it would also be very helpful if you could frame the way you answered his question with the phenomenal framework that you just laid out.
Why did it pass the filter? So I've done businesses that weren't AI, and then I've done the last 3 were AI, and with non-AI it was a little more tractable of a problem, and there was more of a within 3-4 months we had something that we could start selling, and giving customers. With AI, what I've found is it's a little less clear. When are you gonna, especially if you're building your own foundational models, your own AI, it's a little bit more of a challenge to know how long will the R&D take to get to an MVP product. My current startup is a classic example of that, where we pick to do real-time voice generation, X and AI. All these things are hard. No one's done them well to date, and we have to innovate on those dimensions to get it to work well enough. But maybe let's talk about the one at Google. So at Google, I started Chatbase, and I closed $575 million in deals for it. And in there's a whole other conversation around pivots. There was a pivot. I initially did analytics for chatbots and powered 1 million bots, but there was no money to be made in doing analytics for bots. No one would pay anything. And so we pivoted to something related, which was use all this data you have, maybe conversational data that you have, to build better chatbots or better voice bots. So we went from reporting on bots to building bots in a data-driven way, and that made all the difference. That pivot ended up in over $500 million in deals. Today, when you call AT&T or Verizon, you speak to the voice and chat virtual agents we built by modeling human-to-human conversations to build more robust virtual agents. But back to your question, there we were building AI, and there's a lot of work to figure out how to make it optimal. And this was before the current trend of LLMs. So right now, as you know, OpenAI started this whole trend of large language models, which are all magical and in many ways can understand conversations in a way that we couldn't back then. This is going back 4 or 5 years. Back then, we had to build bots with intents. We have to detect what's the question they're asking and what are the 100 ways they could phrase it. And so we would mine that data from the human conversations. Anyway, I guess if I was to say it in one sentence, an AI startup sometimes takes longer to build, especially that first MVP, than in the old days where it's more okay, we're building some web app offering, and it's more clear what the timeline will be.
And okay, so sorry, maybe you
no, before it.
And so let's break down this idea of the research aspect of what you're talking about. There is how do you get comfortable with the idea that this problem can't be solved now, but what if someone else comes around and is able to solve that problem? So, for example, with the intent problem, like people have now been creating LLMs to go about solving that problem.
Yeah.
And with transformers, like a lot of the the reason I'm asking is because with transformers had a lot of computer scientists throw out a lot of the techniques, at least in a lot of the parts of the workflow that were developed for a long time. Like, how do you get comfortable with that? Like that sort of innovators, I guess you could call it dilemma, but it's a little bit different. But the idea is that like you're capitalizing on innovation that happened now, but we don't know who might come out.
What's around the corner?
Right.
So I think a good illustrative example will be to talk about Tomato.ai because I think it's current. We're in the middle of it. So there's this whole space of voice AI that's starting to come around, and we're seeing voice cloning becoming more of a thing, and companies like 11 Labs becoming unicorns. Now they're focused on the creator economy, doing this in an offline fashion, no real-time component, which raises the complexity. But what I would say is there's a lot of unknowns around what will big tech do in the space of voice AI. How will they play? OpenAI already is signaling some of that entry into voice AI. But what gives me confidence is going through those 4 things I talked about. Why was this a good business to start 2 years ago? Roughly almost 2 years ago now. 1, right team. Okay, my co-founder led speech to text and text to speech engineering at Google, team of 30. He knows speech AI. He knows contact center AI. And same year, I've done a lot of work in contact center AI. And so we thought we were really good team for this business. So that, we could check that off. Second, right market. Well, the contact center space is massive, multi-billion dollars, and there's always a need to save money. Like that industry is a cost center. Like AT&T has a $2 billion cost center. Their call center, 65,000 agents. They constantly try to figure out how do we save money there. And so that's not going away. And if you can, in our business, I could do back of the envelope math and see, if you offshore to India, it's half the cost. To the Philippines, it's half the cost. India is a third the cost. If I can accelerate that trend by making those agents more trustworthy, intelligible, with voice AI, accent AI, I could quickly do the math. But okay, that's a massive multi-billion dollar market. Right time? You couldn't have done this 3-4 years ago, generating human-sounding voices on the fly with an input that's low quality. By the way, phone calls are pretty low quality, 8 kilohertz, noisy environments. You try and take this very crude input and produce quality output. This is nothing like, let's say, the 11 Lab issue where people are in a studio recording with a high-end mic. We have real world constraints, bad internet, wherever, the agents are, all these things that you have to make work while doing it in a split second. But again, my point though is because our team was in the weeds in this space of voice AI, we believed that we could solve the problems. And we're just now almost 2 years later, finally coming out of being heads down building. I guess defensibility. I think I've already talked about the team, and a lot of it is around the IP, but then also my ability to do the art of the deal. I've negotiated all kinds of great pricing and found there's something called the data exhaust strategy. You guys heard of it?
No.
Data exhaust. Okay. So companies have so much data, and a lot of times there's data they produce as part of running their business that they don't even need. It's sitting somewhere, and for them it's worth nothing. If you can make it worth a penny, even, okay, you've got something. So you find opportunities where there's dormant data that people are just sitting on that's not worth anything to them, and you sort of pick it off their hands, or get a copy of it. So data exhaust is a strategy, and that's again back to defensibility. If you can find sources of data for cheap, that's a competitive advantage. Or for free. 3 of our call center early customers are investors as well. So they have an incentive to like share data, if that makes sense.
So, and maybe I also wanted to, I'm going to be jumping around here, but because you mentioned so many good concepts there. So first, maybe the art of the deal. That's I think this is going to be very important in the era of AI, because in I've talked about this a number of times, but 2010 to 2020, the primary markets were social, mobile, local. At least that's what a lot of people, VC investors, think about. The primary differentiator that a lot of VCs were looking for was network effects, and also being able to leverage other people's assets. So Uber, Airbnb, great examples you brought up. Now, with in the era of AI, a lot of times it's how do you get access to that data and being really great at getting access to data. Is there a framework that you have to this sort of art of the deal, AI version? Like, is there kind of 3 or 4 principles of like, here's how I even go about identifying those parties and people who might have really interesting data, and then who's really interested in having that conversation? Is it the CIO? Is it the CTO?
Okay, so we're talking specifically about data strategy, and as a startup, how do you get access to data so you can have an asymmetric situation versus other startups, maybe even against large tech companies. So first of all, there's no like silver bullet, no like single answer here, and it depends also what industry you're in. What I would say is, first of all, every startup needs someone that can sell. So better have someone on the team that can sell, because you need to sell into partners for this, for data. I actually had Google when I was there, did work in BD for a while and got some practice doing that role formally. But you don't need formal account practice to do it well. So this is where creativity comes to place and good selling. So what someone that's good at selling does is they do outreach at scale and they find opportunities, because you're not going to know. And so you're working your network, you're getting introductions, you're putting feelers out there. You're putting, I would post to LinkedIn, here's what I need, and then I would get inbound some leads, and most of them don't often work out. But you gotta be out there, and people have to like know what you need and what you're in the market for, and then you gotta negotiate and not settle. People are gonna try to get the most out of you in terms of pricing, and I negotiate really hard down the price to the point where you should be good with walking away. Like good negotiations, you're okay with walking away, and you have enough options. So that best alternative to negotiate a deal. It's the whole concept you learn in negotiations class if you ever take one. But if you have good alternatives, you can negotiate harder with a given party. So there's like a whole set of tools, but if I was to summarize it, is wide net, have multiple options so you can negotiate one against the other and have like different alternatives. Because I've seen pricing be all over the place in terms of like getting data that we need, and it's not always high to quality. So you gotta like, and then there's like what we've done with data providers is you do a small project first just to see how well you work together, how reliable they are, how good at their feedback. With data, we've found, for example, we've had to transcribe calls, and we found that often the first time they do it is wrong, and you have to iterate. So learn to see how these partners are before you go into a big, large deal with them. Is that helpful?
Definitely. So I think this is such a interesting concept because it's so new. I mean, this is not stuff that has. I think maybe you saw a little bit in early .com era when a lot of startups, there was no AWS and there was no Google Cloud, and people were trying to figure out like how to get racks, like server rack space, and that was a little bit similar to what we're seeing now. But I find it super fascinating that you're able to you're a little bit of an early pioneer in this space. And so kind of wanted to dive into your current work at Tomato.ai. I guess, like, what are the biggest challenges that you're facing in terms of improving search speech generation? Like how does your approach it from traditional speech synthesis? Because at least from what I've seen from people in the NLP space is that, I mean, if you can just literally go to a school and see like what's the attendance between or enrollment in like natural language processing versus like speech analysis, and there's just way more in natural language processing. I think because the data sources are just very clean. And I love that point that you hit on. It's like they're in a noisy environment, but that actually offers opportunity for a company like yours. Maybe you can just
Yeah, so you're right. Right now, there's a lot more AI practitioners working on large language models, and that's like the hot corner of AI. But I think that makes the other AI aspects or solutions, there's an opportunity there to shine more because there's less researchers. So you're right, voice AI is like a certain size community. Within it, there's like even less people working on accent AI, very small community. So like we picked this, dark corner of AI, and we see a large market forming around it. And the good news is, not too many people are working on it, and so we can differentiate, and we need to differentiate. And then also real-time voice is also a very small community. There's a lot more people working on offline voice generation, enhancement, those things, big community. Real-time, not many people working on it. Big tech is not working on it. It's a much harder problem, overlooked right now. So that creates an opportunity. Did I answer your question? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I guess maybe there's special subfields that you looked at, like maybe certain people are thinking about using these techniques, and you're thinking that's totally wrong. And
actually, let me go further. Okay, so big community working on speech to text transcription. Big community in the speech space. Smaller community working on speech generation, text to speech. We're more in the text to speech realm. The skill set we search for are speech generation scientists because they're more well versed on the kind of things we need to work on. Vocoders. We're building speech to speech models. We actually don't ever go to text. We keep it in the speech realm. So the reason we don't go to text and back to speech when we change someone's voice and accent is because you introduce transcription errors if you go back to text. Latency is too high to go to text and back. And you lose prosody, like the melody of someone's voice. And you want to preserve those things. So for that reason, we just chose to go speech to speech. We have multiple scientists running experiments all the time. And the way we know if a model is better or worse than other models is we do something called MOS scores, a rating from 1 to 5 of how good the output speech is. And you do it for different things, like naturalness, meaning how human does it sound. In our case, accentedness, how thick is the accent. Things like acoustic quality and other things. So intelligibility. But you score it, and you score it with N-Turkers. So mechanical Turkers are scoring it, and you get like some sort of consensus around these things. And every company would, we prioritize naturalness very high. Like it has to sound human enough to be used. But point being, that's all data-driven scoring, and you let the sort of masses decide what model is best.
So maybe, and feel free to just say that you don't want to go into a certain part of it, but so you have like a speech, you have a sort of speech pipeline. There's no transcription, and I have actually personally experienced this, the loss that you get from transcription. So I totally understand. In fact, that's can oftentimes be in a multimodal pipeline. That's oftentimes can be like the highest latency part of the pipeline.
Yeah, the bottleneck.
Yeah, the bottleneck. That's a perfect way to put it. Are there sort of technologies that have inspired you? Maybe let's start there. Is there technologies that have inspired you in terms of papers or different discoveries that have come out in the past couple of years that really was just told you like now is the time we need to do this now?
So maybe I'll start with like how did we start working on Tomato.ai? Tomato. My co-founder James had this idea that he sat on for a while, and he thought, like, if you're French, if you had a French accent, would you sell wine? Sorry, let me start over. If you were selling wine, would having a French accent help you sell better? So, you're not French, sorry. So, yeah, that was the initial seed of an idea, and then from there, we evolved it to what it is today. But, yeah, in terms of so in terms of the inspiration, it was not a paper, it was like an idea, and then knowing the industry. So the idea of like changing accent, and then knowing the industry, and companies I've worked with, like massive companies offshore 2/3 of their agents. So you're talking to people in India and Pakistan, India and Philippines. Those are the two big offshoring markets, and those calls could go better, if you had this AI available. So that was the seed of the idea, but then we researched it more and figured and asked a potential call center and found that yes, there's a big need for this. And they need this in order to get more business, keep existing business, and hire more. Those three things. So it was more from the business side that we came at it. Now, James led speech AI at Google, so he knew, the latest and greatest. To this day, transformers are like the way to go. They're still like the architecture that most AI practitioners prefer. Nothing has yet come to replace it, and so that's a big part of it. I will say one thing you didn't ask, which is important for any AI startup, is that you need a ton of money to train models. Data is expensive, but not as much as compute. And our startup in our peak month spent $220,000 just on compute. So it used to be that like the salary was like what dominated your cost. But if you're building models, training models, you better budget for compute, and obviously data as well. But compute for us was a big piece. Now I will say this: salaries are 51%, compute's 38% of our spend. Just to put it in perspective. So it's still not as big as salaries, but it's coming close. And it's not something I ever had in a previous startup. In previous startups, I don't know, like 80%, 90% of the cost was salaries. There's no other big bucket with this. So beware, if you're going to do an AI startup, have extra money.
But how does that make you act differently, or is there a different business strategy now that you have that sort of huge cost? Particularly because you could be comfortable with most of your sort of investment going into the people, because that's something you can build upon for 10, 20 years. Hopefully, you can build upon a model that you train for the next couple of years. But
So okay, the way we brought down right now, we're spending $105,000 for more compute per month. And what you end up doing is a multi-year commit deal with your cloud provider, and then you get great pricing, but you're committed to spend a certain amount over a few years. Anyone that's going to be doing an AI startup, is going to be in it for a while and needs compute, should consider doing a deal. It locks you down to one provider, but a much better pricing model.
So speaking of compute, I'd imagine in the contact center area, the elephant in the room right now is large language models, right? These like high compute systems that a lot of people are thinking will just take over the jobs of people working at contact centers. How do you look at that?
Okay. So I used to do automation in the contact center. Now I switched team to human superpowers. I'm giving humans tools to do their jobs better. I see it as like the other side of AI, like how do you make humans more productive? I think both will play a major role in the coming years. If we're talking about just contact centers right now, having been like in the trenches to automate conversations, I know how difficult it can be, because when humans call support, something's bad's happened, like their internet's out, so there's some issue, their flight is like delayed. They want to talk to someone. At Verizon, half the people press 0000 when they call. They don't even give you a chance to like automate. And then they don't know how to describe the problem. They want to negotiate a good deal. They want sympathy. there's all these things that humans want, and which would be tough in the short to medium term, get like a bot to do that well. Not that's not going to happen, but it's going to take some time to get these things right. Also, there's a very long tail of issues to solve. And if you're trying the deterministic way to know, yes, the LLM will do the right thing for this case, for this case, for this case, the 1,000 to 2,000 different categories of issues people have, it's just, we're not there yet, like where it can do what an enterprise wants, which is a predictable response, repeatable and predictable. Okay, so all that said, there will be more and more automation, but there's also a lot more humans that can be activated. So the work we're doing, for example, will create many more people that can take these calls. Let's say you go to the furthest reaches of Earth, where people maybe today are not hireable, give them the tools to sound more credible. Over time, we're doing like accent reduction. We also have the ability to change who you sound like. We can make you sound like a guy from Ohio, neutral English. We can switch your gender. You can sound male, female, whatever works for the call. But also in the future, there would be grammar correction, grammar localization. In India, they say needful. What does that mean? Oh, much needed. Okay, you can swap out, the terminology. All those things will, and put online, people for much lower price points, and that's going to be motivating for, like, let's say, U.S. companies to use more humans.
I mean, the thing that I really like you said it like maybe 10 minutes back was speech-to-speech models. You said speech-to-speech, and that's a very big difference between like text-to-speech and speech-to-text, because what I feel like is being lost there when you go to text is you're losing everything else that comes with when you were trying to convey a thought or a thought is being conveyed to you. Is in like there's this Alex Moravian has the 7-38-55 rule. Is what he calls it, like based on a study he did, which is 7% of like the meaning that is conveyed when you were talking is the actual words you say, and then 38 of that is like intonation or kind of how you actually say it, right? And then the other 55% is body language. So only 7% of like what you actually say in a given text is the text itself. All the rest comes from like the way you describe it, the emotion that you put into it, the tones. So that part is all being lost when you're going to and from text. And I really like this speech to speech. It seems like there's an opportunity there to really understand the other, like, 93% of when you were talking.
Yeah, carry the energy of the conversation. Like, don't squash it. Preserve it. So yeah, it lets you do that.
So I think you bring up such a profound statement, which is that a lot of people are talking about sort of AI that enables humans, but I think this transformation that you have talked about, given your journey, given how much you know about this space, having someone like you say, moving from a frame of reference of automation to enabling humans, that's a big statement, because if you study industrials in the 1980s, there was a big trend to automation of manufacturing of products. And in the 1990s, there was actually way more discussion on, okay, maybe that won't happen. Let's try to use the robots to help human workers in the factories. Now, of course, there's different factories, and some factories you'll see and they're completely fully automated. Some other factories, there's still humans. Like you go to Tesla, there's still humans working there. So I wholeheartedly agree with that kind of framing. Curious, like what parts of do you think that works for all applications? Like what applications really lend themselves to a human really being there? Is it that emotional aspect? Is that what?
Well, having worked on large virtual agent deployments, what you try to knock off with automation are the easy use cases. What's my balance? When is my bill due? Things like that are easier to field. And the more complex conversations where someone says, hey, my aunt, she no longer lives in the house, but she's like still on the bill and she doesn't want to come off it. Good luck. What rules, or how do you instruct an LLM to respond to that? So stories, actually, another big thing is stories. People, when they call support, have a story wrapped around whatever the issue is that complicates the ability to to help them, like to in a predictable way, like walking through a resolution. Okay, so yeah, so I'm I've been there building like some of the most scaled virtual agent like automation solutions. I've seen that it's a slog. You're like working so hard, and you get like single digit kind of improvements in automation, and that number of agents never goes down. Like they always try to reduce it, but like we spent so much effort, and it stays the same size. Is my experience. Not to say like there's going to be stuff coming around the corner, and it's going to inch more into like the automation field, but the counter force happening is the price point for humans will go down, and that's also compelling. And so more humans will be employed in support. Now I will say this: our type of solution goes way beyond contact centers. That's the beachhead.
Yes.
As long as humans are talking to each other, this is useful. Because we can start with meetings, like any meeting where you have denoising can also have this. Like, let me soften the accent a bit just so I can follow what someone's saying. Whatever accent you find challenging, you'd be able to get help with. And then earpieces, so we're all these days are using earbuds, and that could be built into that. And imagine traveling abroad and understanding Scottish guide a little better. I was just in Italy actually like a week ago, and we did a tour of the David in Florence, and the guide, she was great, very knowledgeable, but very thick Italian accent, and we all got these headsets to hear her because there's a lot of people speaking, and it's hard to hear her without it. And I wish there was like a button I could press, and her accent would be more Americanized, for that tour, just for the tour, so I can really follow what she's saying, because otherwise I was like really straining to understand.
So, and I was going to say, I think the applications of speech to speech are way greater than contact call center. Call center software is a large market, but I think creating one language for all humans that we can all communicate in. Because if you didn't learn Latin, you couldn't read in hundreds of years ago. If you didn't learn English now, you can't read most of the scientific work.
Translation is that next wave of speech to speech, and what's hard about doing translation, like from one language to another in real time, is that you need a large multi-second context window, is where we're at. In order to know how to properly translate, you need to know enough of the words in the sentence to know how to reframe it in another language, how to translate it. So when we have text kind of translation, they can rewrite the text. Like they do an initial guess, and it's rewritten in front of you. And so that works fine. But speech, you don't have that luxury. You have to get the words out in a split second for it to be real time. Anyway, that's one of the challenges of real-time translation that folks are now struggling with.
So I think to summarize your framework, it's automation, AI automation. When you have a test, it's simple and is sort of time wasting for human. Use AI, so enablement of humans. When it's more complicated, there's either emotion, there's concepts involved, so maybe you call a story a concept. I think those are, and then third, where use a human when it might be cheaper than using a model. Maybe a human actually be more cost efficient. Maybe that's
look, there's also this element of relationship building. If you look at T-Mobile, they always win all these customer support awards because unlike other companies that care about handle time, how long is the call? Callbacks, are they calling back? The way T-Mobile views a call is, it's awesome, opportunity to talk to our customer and get to know them. And they don't judge you by how long the call goes. In fact, that means, they build rapport with the customer, and you end up being able to there's still businesses you can upsell and cross-sell more, but it's about relationship building. So there's a small set of companies, 10 to 20%, that don't do what everyone else does, which is about cost savings. They don't see it as a cost center. They see it as an opportunity to increase the lifetime value of the customer.
Wow. So the reason why that's incredible is because you see in professional services firms is that there'll be a tracker. And so if you're a lawyer or you're a banker, they keep track of, for the partners, how often you communicate with the customer.
Yeah.
And then if there's, let's say, a large legal case, or there's a big transaction for a banker, they go back to the tracker to see how many times we talk to the customer.
Yeah.
And so that's the exact opposite of what you're saying. And so I think what you might find is that people will start tracking how did you build the relationship with the customer up until that spend point, right? So if they're buying a house, if they're buying a car, did we maintain a relationship with that end customer? So that's that actually is pretty mind blowing framework there. So I mean, you're not only involved in Tomato, you also have your own incredible investment portfolio. Mm-hmm. You have Jason Calacanis, he has a book, Angel Investing. There's a number of angel investing books. Like, what are the key qualities you look for? And honestly, that may not be as important as like just convincing the founder that you're worthwhile to have a relationship with. Because I think like you can read, there's a bunch of resources on what makes a good startup, but I find it's just like convincing that, like, what I find is lacking from all these resources is, why should you be on my team if you're not working on my team full time now?
So, okay, let's see. So I've been doing angel investing for over 10 years. And when I started, what helped me get into like good deals that had good outcomes in the end were warm introductions by angel investors that were already like well known and trusted and hopefully already in the deal. So if I was to start out as an angel investor, I would build relationships with other angel investors, like meet them for lunch, like get to know them, build relationships with them, and then ask them, hey, if there's like something you're looking at, we'd love to like get a heads up, get an introduction. So that's how I would start, by like befriending already successful angel investors that have like a reputation and writing their coattails. So that's how you start. Now, I have to admit, over the years, I've moved away from like doing a lot of like early stage, more towards later stage. Early stage is a 7 to 10 year kind of timeline, and you're hoping to get 10, 20x, when it works out, more than that, Late stage is a 3 to 5 year timeline, and the returns are like 3 to 5x, like when it works out. But more often than not, it seems to work out. Late stage, a lot of the risk was taken out already. So I've gravitated more towards that. So you don't seem as smart with late stage, and you have all these great maybe names in your portfolio that maybe people think you somehow predicted early on. But still, it seems to be like a pretty nice place to play. Like, not public markets where everyone can play, not seed stage where 9 out of 10 companies will fail, but somewhere in the middle between those two, late stage, where maybe half the time it's like a really good return, and overall, like it's a nice healthy return.
And so how are you evaluating companies? How has that changed when you went from early to later stage?
Mm-hmm. When it was early stage, it's a lot about like the entrepreneur. And like, will this person have the grit? Is this the right person that I want to invest in? Like, do I think they have it as an entrepreneur? And I would still go back to those 4 things we talked about earlier about what makes for good business. But I think that the top thing, if I was to pick one, it's like the founder and CEO, and maybe the initial founding team. Like, how strong are they? Is the ultimate question for early stage. Like, because by the way, your initial idea for a startup is always wrong. Mm-hmm. We say that here, it's always wrong. And by starting, there's all these people that like wait to find the perfect idea, and then they will leave their job. But your idea is always wrong. And by starting to work on the business, talking to end customers, you make shifts towards the actual business you end up doing. There's always like adjustments you make, and sometimes large pivots. So my point there, though, is if it's the right entrepreneur, they'll seek the information. They won't get stuck on their initial idea. They'll find what the market wants, and they'll build a good team around it. And that's what you want. Late stage, really, it's like there's so much information by then. It's like, what's their revenue? What are the VCs investing in them? I would say a big signal is like the VCs in the deal, because they're like the best in the world, and they've done the due diligence, and so you don't need to. Like, they've gone through it. You hope, We've seen examples last few years where sometimes they get into crypto stuff, but more often than not, they've done their homework.
So I think maybe a helpful framework is an angel investor. So let's maybe go through why would they take money from an angel as opposed to your typical VC?
Yeah. So angel investors come in earlier. It's often smaller checks. When you're doing the pre-seed, especially, it often is the angels that come in early. They take more risk, but also they don't have always the reputation with the VC, and so they play where they can. So they come in, do the pre-seed often, meaning when the company's first formed is not much, and they make their bets early. Later stages also have angels, but sometimes it's hard to fit them in. So depending on how hot the deal is, both of the rounds I raised for this startup were oversubscribed, and we had to actually negotiate with angels to take less of the company so we can give more to the VCs that needed certain amounts to justify the investment. Okay, so angels have less leverage and they play where they can, and there's the exceptions. There's the super angels that can, that have the reputation of VCs. But I'm right now talking about your typical angel, which doesn't. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think a good reason to partner with an angel as opposed to a VC is also just their expertise in the space. So you're not exactly providing capital. You're saying we're going to align ourselves with this angel investor because we know that this person has certain set of resources and certain set of power.
That's true too. Yeah, if they have let's say the network or the expertise, that's great. But know that you can also get that as an advisor. Having him as an advisor, if you can't, let's say, get into invest.
Right.
So when you are angel investing, how often is just that you are money versus you are providing a whole lot of value, and then when you are providing value, what value do you find yourself providing most?
So in the early days, it was seed stage. In new companies, I was doing more hands-on help. For example, there was a company called Duda that's today they are a website building platform that's bigger than Wix. By the way, they power more sites than Wix. But many people haven't heard of them because they don't go to consumers. They go to website builders and give them tools. So they're B2B. But when they were starting out, and they've raised more than $25 million by now, I forget what the total was. But when there were two guys, that's when I invested. And back then they were going from pizza shop to pizza shop to see if they'll use their tools to build their website. Their initial idea was they would take your website and generate a mobile site automatically for you. And you only have to update your website, and your mobile would automatically be updated. They still have elements of that, but that was the initial business. And they would go pizza shop to pizza shop. And so me being the B2B guy that likes to, the art of the deal, I was go to AT&T or GoDaddy. They have thousands of people selling into SMBs, selling all kinds of services for SMBs. And they could just add on your service. And so you don't need to build the army of sellers. They have them. And that's what they did. They ended up having Yahoo for domains, Google for domains, GoDaddy, and those kind of companies partnered for that.
And how did you meet the team?
Can't remember. So they're Israeli, I'm Israeli, and it was through the Israeli mafia, I think. I forget exactly.
Okay, so got it. So so it seems just kind of a combination of providing capital, but also set of expertise.
Yeah.
So we'd love to ask you the closing question, which is, what is the AI industry going to look like 1 year from now? And
easy.
Please feel free to. Please feel free to. You don't have to predict the future, but why the reasoning behind your answer is probably more important.
Yeah. So I think I'll first talk about robotics. I think there's a lot of interesting work right now happening in robotics. Robotics for a long time was this cute thing, and you'd see the Boston Dynamics videos, and awesome, but how does it apply to me or to business? But companies like Figure AI, which I have to admit I'm an investor in, are starting to create robots that will go into warehouses and work there 24/7, be more reliable, and cheaper cost structure, and also with large language models, like they're partnered with OpenAI, be able to like respond to instructions, directions in a very human-friendly way. Language is how we communicate, and now robots will actually understand us in a way that they've never before. I really think, that this next year will be pivotal in getting a lot more robots, and I'm not yet saying in the home, like that's coming next, but in warehouses, and really transform like what their businesses look like. So an acceleration there. So that's one area. I also think with the large language models, there's so much competition now, and everyone's trying to outdo each other. Every day we see a new, company coming on top, with their metrics, and we're all going to benefit from that. So what's going to happen, I think, is, and I'm not even talking about call centers here. I'm talking about like any like repetitive task that people do will more and more in the next year be automated away. Because now non-technical people can use language, not code, to automate stuff. And so more and more we're going to see that. There'll be specialized models trained for industry. And all of a sudden, it's not just, the bottleneck is not programmers, because language is used to instruct. So there'll be an explosion around automating common, simple tasks. Okay. The last one, and I'm biased, is speech AI. And I have to talk about it. And actually, I should call it voice filtering, I think, is the umbrella term. And within it, you can change the speech, you can change the accent, there's all kinds of dimensions you can change around how someone sounds. And I think that those technologies will come online, and there'll be like more and more adoption around it. Like, think about someone in, Madagascar that can't get a job. They've tried so hard to get a job in like places like Europe or beyond. And now when they're interviewing, they're just like installing this thing. And all of a sudden they're passing interviews like in a way that they couldn't before. Because there's an issue of trust, there's an issue of intelligibility, all of a sudden that's up-leveled. And people are just like getting more opportunities than they could ever. And so I think there'll be, in the next year, a lot of that happening, like starting to happen, where people everywhere in the world will start using these concepts.
Perfect. Well, that's a perfect summarization of what the AI space is going to look like. And our final question, thank you so much for joining us. And everyone, that's our interview with Ofer, Collective Nation. As we wrap up another episode, I want to express my gratitude to the guests and to you, our curious and passionate listener. Today's discussion has once again illuminated the terrain of AI, offering us a rare glimpse into the mind shaping the field. If you enjoyed the episode, please leave a comment or review on your favorite podcast player. And until next time, thank you for being a part of this journey. Keep exploring.